Okay, why do you support Trump?
I just like where we're at right now as an economy, markets.
Okay, can you
That's
name
mainly
one
my
macro
focus.
indicator, for example, GDP growth, real median wage growth, unemployment, inflation, etc., that's better off right now than it was the end of Biden's administration?
I think that's a bit unfair to look at. The economy, it's cyclical, so it's not always going to be in a better spot. I think inflation has certainly increased short term just due to geopolitical conflict, but I
And who
think it's
started
more
that
so just a
conflict?
temporary increase. What's up?
Who started that conflict, sir?
Trump did.
So it's due to a geopolitical conflict that Trump started, and then also due to Trump's tariff policy. So it's due to
I
policies
don't think
Trump enacted,
4.2% is
and it's
necessarily
caused
concerning
by Trump.
inflation number there.
What's that?
I don't believe 4.2% inflation is necessarily concerning.
You don't think 4.2% inflation is concerning? The Federal Reserve does.
What, baseline's 2%? 4% is when they start to raise flags, but it's not necessarily,
4% is almost double. That is definitely a concern. What do you mean it's
2%
just when they start to
baseline.
raise flags? No, they raise flags specifically well before then.
It's around 3.5 to 4% is when it really,
It was
they
3 to
start to look at it.
4%
But
that they specifically start raising. 3% is they started raising. 4% is clear that they know that this is worse for the economy. It's significantly worse, and we're seeing a trend back up in terms of inflation when we likely would have seen that inflation go down. Actually, there's a Federal Reserve report that came out recently that indicated that we'd be around pre-pandemic levels of inflation if Donald Trump never imposed the tariffs and the war with Iran in the very first place.
that's a whole separate topic. But, they're going to look to increase interest rates later this year to help combat that inflation. So we'll see how
Yep,
that
again,
goes.
inflation caused by what? Trump. So they have
Sure,
to
but
they have to keep interest rates up because of Trump.
certainly that's how it works. And, how do you combat rising inflation? You increase interest rates.
Yes, but who's causing the rising inflation? Trump. So who's causing the rise in interest rates even though he wants lower interest rates? Trump. Who's not signing a housing bill even though they can and it's literally been it has the votes to get passed? Trump.
I'm
Because
not
they
promoting
won't
that
pass
housing
the
bill.
Save America Act, which by the way is just a voter suppression bill.
Yeah, I'm not too. I can cover other topics I'm familiar with. I'm not going to argue with you on those points just because I'm not educated enough in those areas. But, from what we've seen, consumers, they've been resilient to these inflation levels. They're still spending. That's been proven by corporate profits outperforming expected earnings. We're continuing to grow and expand as an economy as a whole. So,
Growing at a lower rate though than we were under the Biden-Harris administration.
it's not always going to go up. There's cycles for a reason.
Yeah, you say it's not always going to go up, but it's the conditions of it going down is not just cyclical because of a natural economic trend, but because of the things that Trump specifically did to cause these things.
I think it's cyclical.
Okay, but you just agreed that it was specifically due to Trump's conflict that he started. It's Trump's war.
Yeah, that was the temporary short-term increase in the inflation. That's why
And
we
you said
saw.
it's temporary. It's been happening since the end of February, sir. That's 3 months.
I mean,
That's actually
long do
sorry.
you
That's
think
4
temporary
months. I
is?
apologize.
How long do you think? You think it's just a 1 month period where we're going to see a jump from 4% down to 2%? No, it doesn't work like that.
Wait, but it's still up. You understand? You just say, "Oh, it's so temporary." Well, that's still because of Trump, and it still makes things worse.
So what's your defense?
And it would not
between,
have happened otherwise.
When inflation rose with Biden. So it's
Well,
okay
that
when
wasn't
it is.
because of Biden, sir. Do you not know the difference between something that is caused by the administration versus something that's not caused by the administration?
You can always fall back on someone's faults. You can always make that argument that when someone's in office, it's the effects of the previous
Yeah,
administration.
but can you point to anything specifically that they would have caused to make conditions worse off or to cause inflation?
I cannot, to be honest. No, I wasn't.
Okay,
too,
but I can point to
educated.
specific things that you've already agreed upon that actually led to inflation getting higher.
I mean, I think it's just more so we have differing opinions on this. I think with where we're at 4.2%, there's many other indicators that are still proving that we're still growing as an economy. I know
Like
you're
what?
going to say that. I can go to wage growth. The
Which
jobs
is
are
growing at a low
increasing.
rate.
It's a low rate, but it's still growing.
It's growing at a lower rate.
Still growing.
Is it? Look at real median
They just
wages.
announced
If you look
50K.
at
They
real
just
median
announced
wages,
They
If you-
announced 50,000 jobs
yeah, if you
today.
no, if you look at real median wages specifically, you will actually see that the beginning of his administration, before he got in office, Q4 of 2024, it was 374. Right now, it's 376, sir, and that's Q1 2026 at the end. That it was
Repeat that one
376.
more
So
time,
it's
sorry.
it's gone up by literally less than 1%, over a year and a quarter. That's not good.
I mean, I'll go back to it once again. This economy works in a cyclical period. We're not always going to beat or outperform what came before us. I certainly
Apparently, with
think that.
Democrats, you do, but with Republicans, that's not something that you can expect.
I'm sorry, repeat that.
With Republicans, it's something that you can't expect, but with Democrats, that seemingly is.
I don't understand what you're saying there.
With Democrats, we do things to make conditions better, right? Republicans do things to make conditions stagnant or get worse.
Are you saying that as a blanket statement?
I'm saying it as a general statement.
So you would agree with the fact that every single Democratic president has been better than every single Republican president?
For the economy, generally speaking, in the modern era, yes. Can you name a single Republican candidate that was better for the economy in the modern era?
I mean, the only option there is Trump. Like,
But things weren't better for the economy comparative to what it was under Biden. So, try again.
What's your defense for that?
I'm waiting. Name one single candidate that was Republican that was better for the economy than any Democrat in the modern era.
I don't. My knowledge doesn't extend that far back.
It doesn't extend anywhere, it seems, because there is no information that will indicate this. Because Democrats are better for the economy.
So I guess what are the struggles we're seeing right now? Like, how are Americans struggling with the economy currently?
Inflation has gone up, unemployment has gone up, job growth has gone down. We've seen real domestic manufacturing investment decline every single quarter of Trump's administration so far. We've seen lower real domestic manufacturing, or lower real GDP growth, lower real median wage growth. We've seen bankruptcies spike. We can point to countless things.
So you can educate me more on this maybe, but you're saying that inflation has risen, but it seems that consumer spending is also that hasn't been affected at all.
And
it seems that they're pretty resilient to this.
You say it seems that they're pretty resilient, but if consumer spending makes up most of the economy, that means that there's not much investment.
Investment in what?
Investment across the entire economy.
Can you explain that further?
It's actually it's a concerning thing for prices.
So you're saying consumer spending is bad?
No, I'm saying consumer spending making up such a high percent of the overall level of GDP growth is a concerning thing. Why is it concerning? Because it says that the economy doesn't have much investment to account for the consumer spending that exists, which can be harmful for pricing.
Okay,
Don't just listen to me. Listen to Econ with Sarah, who has a PhD in economics, who made a video just for you on TikTok.
So let me just make sure I'm understanding this right. So you're saying that what you believe is price and inflation is eventually going to outpace what consumers are spending. Is that your belief, or what you were saying?
You say it one more time?
Yeah, were you saying that consumer spending increasing is a bad look for the economy?
No, not consumer spending increasing. Consumer spending specifically being this level of proportion of the overall economic growth. Now, if you want to look at consumer spending, did you know consumer spending actually is growing at a lower rate under the Trump administration than what it was under Biden's admin?
I can't make the argument. Like, of course, that's
I've looked at consumer spending and I've done the math.
My whole point here has been that the economy is cyclical. You can't you're saying that, oh, it's Trump's decision on this. Like, what has been Trump's decision that has affected consumer spending specifically?
If you're saying what's his thing that's affected consumer spending, I didn't say anything. I just brought up a response to the point that you just said. If anything, like a consumer spending being higher isn't anything I would point to as a reflection of him, but rather simply like a trend that existed in terms of the economy that would have been better off if we specifically then had other aspects of the economy growing, such as investment, right, and whatnot as well. So you have to understand that, like, I'm not saying that increases in consumer spending are bad. What I'm saying is that increases in consumer spending to this proportional degree without seeing increases in other aspects of the economy proportionate, right, that's when we could possibly see problems, or at least flags that need to be raised from a question standpoint.
Okay. You mind if we pivot over to corporations and their profitability?
Yeah, corporate profits have gone down since Trump got in office.
That's false.
No, it's true. I actually have done the math myself as well. The last year and a half under Biden's administration, there were higher levels of corporate profits as a percentage comparative to the first year and a half under Trump. Yup.
Once again, you might be right.
Dude, basically every aspect of the economy is better off under Democrats, including even corporate profits.
But the corporate profits are nowhere near a bad spot right now. They're still anticipated for
Wait, just because they're not in a bad spot does not mean that they're better off under Republicans. I asked you for a single
But that's just
candidate
a
who's on the
hypothetical
Republican side. I
argument.
asked
So
you for
you're
a
saying
single
if
candidate
Harris
on the
was in
Republican
office,
side. I asked you for a single candidate on the Republican side that was better for the economy than any Democrat in the modern era, and you couldn't mention.
there's not many options to choose from there, and plus my knowledge honestly just doesn't extend out that far. I wouldn't be able to, I just want to talk with what we're seeing right now. You're going under
Can
a
you name one? How
hypothetical
about this?
that
Can you name one policy that Republicans have passed that would benefit the average American more than it's benefit the rich?
the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, taxes
That mostly
raises
went to the
standard
rich.
deduction. So increasing the standard deduction doesn't help out the poor.
That is a good thing. What you're not understanding is that existed through the TCJA and was agreed upon by Democrats, and it's a small portion of the overall bill in terms of the nominal amount of money spent. So nominally, most of the money went to the richest Americans.
I mean, yeah, I can agree with that, but I think making the statement that it's not helping, like you also said it yourself, that does help the poor out, but
Yeah, I said the increase of the standard deduction is a good thing. I don't disagree with that. I actually agree with that aspect of the bill, but it's a small portion of the bill. So it largely benefit the richest Americans, and it provided some benefits for working class people, but most of the benefits go to the rich. And Democrats would have maintained all the benefits applicable to individuals who are lower and middle income.
yeah. So what would be some things that you think would benefit the poor?
Expanding access to healthcare through a universal healthcare system. The most personal bankruptcies are defined specifically through the fact that people can't pay their medical expenses. We have 45 to 68,000 American lives lost every single year due to lack of health insurance. We spend nearly twice as much per individual on healthcare expenditure comparative to the OECD average, and they have better average health outcomes comparative to the United States within most aspects of healthcare. So I would argue that it's better specifically to advocate for expanding access to healthcare, expanding access to education, specifically through free public universities, as a competition to the current private universities that exist now to help reduce costs of products for people, or cost of education. Sorry. Along with the fact that we can point to expanding the child tax credit to $6,000 for the first year of a child's life, $3,600 to them being 5 years old, $3,000 to them being 18, a $25,000 tax credit for first-time homebuyers for new homes, a $2,000 cap on pharmaceuticals out of pocket, $35 per month cap on insulin. Along with, we can point to a $50,000 tax deductible for small businesses in the first year of them starting out. I can point to countless policies Democrats advocate for that are actually meant to help the working class people of this country, whereas Republicans, you can't point to anything.
Yeah, I'm not gonna. You spoke so fast there. I heard snippets of one part and the other. If you want to, if you want to continue this conversation, slow down a little bit, I'd be more than happy to hear out each point. And
okay, can you repeat? Like, do you know anything of what I said at all?
I heard $35. Somewhere I heard 50,000 for small business. Like I said, I was trying to follow along. You just kept on talking really fast. I'm not even trolling. I'm genuinely trying to listen.
Okay. Alrighty. So they have a universal access to healthcare by expanding access to healthcare in this country, health insurance. Other countries around the world, under an OECD average, have nearly half the per individual healthcare expenditure comparative to the United States, and actually have better average health outcomes. 45 to 68,000 American lives lost every single year due to lack of health insurance under our current system, and most bankruptcies, most personal bankruptcies, are due to the inability to pay medical expenses. Over 130 million Americans are struggling with medical debt, and Democrats want to go ahead.
So what would be what would a solution look like for that? How can we help combat that?
Provide a universal access to health care, such as Medicare for all.
And who pays for that?
The taxpayer, which we'd spend less in taxpayer money than we currently spend under private healthcare model.
Okay. And I'm assuming you believe that it should be staggered on who pays more into that versus who pays less, assuming you want the rich to pay more, poor to pay less.
I believe in a progressive tax structure.
And do you have an ideal structure in mind of what that looks like, splitting it up between the different income levels?
I have a general idea.
You mind providing that?
Tell me the income threshold, and I'll tell you my thoughts.
We'll go married filing jointly, $200,000 a year.
Married filing jointly, I'd keep it the same as it currently is,
okay,
if not less.
Less, okay.
Because
I guess
Harris's plan Harris's plan was to only increase taxes on income over $400,000 a year. Now, if we could get a universal healthcare system, then it could include slight increases in taxes for income around 200K, but I would only be okay with what is necessary to provide the healthcare for people, meaning it will reduce your healthcare costs overall. I do not want to impose more costs on income at that level and below.
And by the way, I think also too, Parker, that if you have a universal healthcare system that will be able to cover everyone, it'll also probably actually reduce your taxes because the Medicare tax, the Medicaid tax, all those taxes would actually go away or actually be kind of brought together. So you actually wouldn't be having all these multiple taxes, but you just have one tax, and that would actually likely in the long run bring it down because, as Parker stated, it is cheaper over time.
Yeah, I don't want to take up too much of your time here. This is going way deeper into politics and much I follow or even, really care about too much, to be honest. But, I'm not going to say I'm a Republican or Democrat. I sway both sides just based on the candidate. I would have loved to hear more about Harris's campaign, but she was put in a really tough spot, with Biden dropping out late. So I was a fan of Biden. I'm a fan of Trump as well. I liked Obama. I'm going to support U.S. president no matter what. I believe the way our government's set up, no matter who's in office, we're still going to have a fighting chance here. But obviously, we see different points of views for certain things, but I certainly appreciate what you guys do. I believe freedom of speech and open debates like this is always progressive. So
I would challenge what you said just in part, just to say that you shouldn't support like almost every president just because they are the president. While I understand what you're saying about like national pride and like unity and stuff, some presidents and some people are just so bad that you don't actually need to support them. And I would say that Trump falls into that category. I'm not sure what exactly makes him like a good person that like you would like look up to or like actually like see as like being worthy of the office. I do think that on every measure his behavior has shown that he is not worthy of the office and therefore does not deserve my respect.
And this is more so just what I personally believe. From what I've experienced, people who get up into that power, you don't do that in like you're a bad person if you get to that level of power. You have to.
You don't think someone can get to the office of president through let's say lying or like through base corruption or trying to like use propaganda or using fear tactics at all? You don't think Donald Trump in his campaign leaned on like almost primal fears and worries in order to convince 49% of all Americans that actually the major part of all like our problems are like immigrants and like brown people and like trans people and things like that, not the fact that it's in fact like all the rich people who are like stealing money from you, the fact that we have like our first trillionaire and like he's paying like probably less in taxes than a teacher, the fact that millions of Americans every day struggle just to pay for their health care and their education and their child care and all that kind of stuff. Like I think it is pretty clear that that Trump leaned into the fear that we Americans have always had of the other, instead of actually trying to lift us up and saying that our actual problem, which is people taking money from us, that it's the high elite that are actually in the government trying to take away the money from the middle class. That's the real problem, not the fact that we have migrants and trans people and everything.
Yeah, I mean, I'll make the argument. I don't think Trump really ran on fear as much as you said. Certainly the borders and the migrants was a big part of his running there, but I didn't really, I guess from what I heard, I didn't hear too much of a focus from trans or
when you polled MAGA supporters at the time, many of them listed as in their top three. They listed. Thank you for the flowers. Thank you so much. They listed not only like the a Biden economy and everything as number one issue, but they listed those migrants plus trans people because they had ads everywhere about just like how like trans people are like taking over. They had about migrants. The way that Trump talked about migrants was very bad. It was like base, like about like the blood of the country and like blood purity and all that kind of stuff. I mean, like this was like very active during the campaign. So I think maybe you missed it, but I think many people got the
trans thing. I don't think that was as big of a focus.
I think it was. I mean, Trump's they actually did polling on this. Trump's one of his most effective ads was on trans rights. Like one of his most effective ads was there, and he ran that ad all the time.
Oh, I'll take a deeper look into that. I'm honestly not familiar with that. I feel like I'm in a pretty educated and moderate area of where I live. So, a lot of what I see could be different from, maybe what you see in the Deep South. So,
He ran those ads also in moderate areas because again, even in those areas, he leaned on people's fears of the other in order to scare people about migrants coming to these like white neighborhoods and about trans people like trying to turn your kids into like another gender or things like that. He brought these up all the time, which is why I think it did work. But he also brought up things about the economy, but he tied it back to those issues. He didn't bring up the actual issue, which is people like him who are basically benefiting from the economy and who are stealing from the poor and from the middle class. That's where our like problems go, which is why the party and he himself have like given us like no policy positions whatsoever. Like he just we actually had a bipartisan housing bill that was voted on bipartisanly, which like never happens, and Donald Trump won't sign it. Like that right there tells you, I think, exactly like where his priorities are. That we have a bipartisan bill to help to at least try to bring down housing costs in this country, and Donald Trump won't sign the bill. That should tell you something.
Certainly something I'll look more into as well. Like I said, I really only focus on the market and the economic side when it comes to politics there. I'm not too into the, more socialist looks there. But I guess just one quick thing I want to bring up before, I dip out of here. You mentioned how Trump benefits from the economy and how his family does as well. That's something that I will admit is likely happening as well, but I think it happens across every presidency and, who's close up there. Like, I guess my kickback to you is, what are your thoughts around Nancy Pelosi? You mentioned
it's
that.
Bad. I'm for banning any insider trading. I'm for banning Congress people from using their position to gain more wealth. I think that they should have more stringent ethical, laws. I think they should have very strict financial disclosures.
Okay.
I believe in all those things. But I just want to say, Donald Trump doing what other presidents may have done is not an excuse. He took it from a 10 to a 1,000. No president in the history of this country has benefited more financially for him and his family than Donald Trump. There has never been a president that has used the actual position of power to make the rules and the laws in order to benefit himself like Donald Trump. Like, you cannot find one president that has done more than Donald Trump. Like, as I said, 1.8 to $2 billion. I think it was yesterday, there was a news story about how Donald Trump Jr., because Donald Trump Jr. Owns like a gun, like a one gun company. I think it's something about like kind of guns. Donald Trump made a new rule that will actually help benefit that one gun company in order to make more profit. It is happening every single week that him and his family are making more and more money, and he's using the levers of power to make sure that we cannot look into it. He cannot be at all looked into his taxes anymore. We can't look into his taxes nor his family's taxes for any wrongdoing from now plus into the future. He made that ruling himself. That tells you that like he's trying to hide something, that maybe he doesn't want his family to be looked at. Why? Because he's a corrupt man and he's using the levers of power that we gave him in order to benefit himself.
Certainly. And that's something that I'll be open-minded to. I'll do my own research on that, see where I come across on that. But I think a good way to end all this is all of us agreeing and coming to a kumbaya that although Trump, he can be wrong for taking advantage of the government, Nancy Pelosi, we have to hold her that same standard. She's just as wrong.
Which we do, which I said.
Yeah,
me and Parker, who are here, me and Parker have never been a fan. I've never been a fan of Nancy Pelosi. I think she's very corrupt. However, I'm not going to be like this, like whataboutism. I think we're talking about Donald Trump, who is the president of the United States, not about Nancy Pelosi. And if you want to bring up, charges against Nancy Pelosi, go right ahead. But then you have to say the same thing for Donald Trump and for every other person about Don Jr. plus everybody else. That's the problem. I'm not going to engage in this like whataboutism. I'm talking about Donald Trump.
Fair enough. Awesome. That's all I have for you guys. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your night.
All right, you as well.
All right, thanks.
Yep, take care.
Bye-bye.
All right, I'm gonna do one more for sure, and then we're gonna get off. It might be like a short conversation.